The Johnson household was buzzing with excitement. Christmas was 2 weeks away, and like every year, the family was preparing for their traditional trip to the countryside. For the children, Sarah and Ethan, it was the highlight of the year, a time to run free on their grandparents' farm, climb trees, and escape the confines of the city. For Amanda, their mother, this trip was about reconnecting with her roots and embracing the spiritual essence of the season. But for her husband, Mark, it was just another chore. He loved his family, but he saw no point in the elaborate preparations Amanda insisted on every year. The gifts, the snacks, and above all, the prayers. He found them unnecessary. "Do we really need this much stuff for 3 days?" Mark grumbled as he hauled yet another suitcase toward the car. Amanda, folding clothes into a bag, gave him a patient smile. "You say that every year, and yet every year, you end up thanking me for thinking of everything." Mark rolled his eyes playfully. "Still doesn't explain why you have to pray over every little thing." "Because it's important," Amanda said firmly, pausing to look him in the eye. "God's protection is what keeps us safe." Mark scoffed. "I think the seatbelts and airbags do a pretty good job of that." The tension was subtle but present, a reflection of deeper differences between them. Amanda's faith had always been central to her life, but Mark, while respectful, treated it as an afterthought. Over the years, Amanda had learned to pick her battles, but she never stopped praying for her husband's heart to soften. The warning they ignored. A week before the trip, Amanda had a dream. She was standing on a narrow road surrounded by dense fog. Ahead, she could see her family in their car, but when she tried to call out to them, her voice wouldn't come. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared in the road, and the car swerved violently. She woke up in a cold sweat, her chest tight with fear. The next morning, she hesitated before telling Mark. "I had a strange dream last night," she began cautiously. Mark barely looked up from his coffee. "Was it one of those signs from God you're always talking about?" Amanda bit her lip. "I don't know, but I think we need to pray more before the trip, just in case." Mark sighed heavily. "Amanda, it's just a dream. You're overthinking it. We've made this trip a dozen times, and nothing's ever happened." Despite his dismissal, Amanda couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. She prayed silently every night, asking for protection and guidance. The morning of the trip arrived, and the children were bouncing with excitement as Mark loaded the last bag into the car. Amanda tried once more to gather the family for prayer, but Mark waved her off. "We're already running late," he said. "You can pray in the car." As they drove out of the city, the atmosphere was lively. Sarah and Ethan sang Christmas carols in the back seat, their voices slightly off-key but full of joy. Amanda smiled at their innocence but couldn't relax. Her hands gripped her cross pendant tightly, her lips moving in silent prayer. About an hour into the journey, Mark slowed the car as they approached a bend in the road. Standing by the roadside was an elderly woman wrapped in a tattered shawl. She raised her hand, signaling for them to stop. Mark hesitated. "Should we?" "Let's see if she needs help," Amanda urged. As the car rolled to a stop, the woman shuffled closer. Her eyes were sharp, almost piercing, and her voice carried an unsettling weight. "You're traveling to the countryside?" she said, more a statement than a question. "Yes, ma'am," Amanda replied. The woman's gaze locked onto Amanda. "Pray before you go further. There's danger ahead." Mark chuckled nervously. "We'll be fine, ma'am. Thanks for the advice." The woman didn't smile. "Pray," she repeated firmly, "or turn back now." Amanda's heart pounded as they drove away. "We need to pray," she said urgently. Mark shook his head. "It's just an old woman trying to scare us." But Amanda couldn't ignore the warning. "Mark, please, let's just pray. It doesn't cost us anything." Mark sighed, but reluctantly agreed. Amanda led a brief prayer, her words trembling with urgency. As they finished, Sarah chimed in from the back seat. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Amanda forced a reassuring smile. "Of course, sweetheart." The drive grew more ominous as they entered a stretch of dense forest. The trees loomed overhead, their bare branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The GPS signal faded, leaving them reliant on an old map Amanda had packed. "See? This is why I told you to update the GPS," Mark muttered, his frustration mounting. Amanda ignored his comment, her focus on the road ahead. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced out the window and thought she saw movement in the trees, but when she looked again, it was gone. "Mom, I saw it too," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Saw what?" Mark asked, his tone skeptical. "A man in the trees," Sarah said. "He was staring at us." Mark laughed nervously. "Probably just a shadow. Nothing to worry about." But Amanda wasn't so sure. She tightened her grip on her pendant and whispered another prayer. Without warning, the car jolted violently, throwing everyone forward. Mark pulled over, muttering curses under his breath. "What now?" As he stepped out to inspect the tires, Amanda followed, her unease growing. The rear tire was flat, a jagged piece of metal lodged deep in the rubber. "This is just great," Mark said, kicking the tire in frustration. "Where did that even come from?" Amanda looked around, her eyes scanning the dark forest. The metal shard seemed out of place, as if someone had planted it there deliberately. "Mark, let's turn back," she said. "Something doesn't feel right." "We're not turning back," Mark snapped. "We're almost there." As they continued on a spare tire, the sky darkened further. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a mournful wail. Sarah and Ethan huddled close in the back seat, their earlier excitement replaced by nervous silence. Then it happened. The brakes failed. Mark's face turned pale as he slammed his foot down repeatedly, but the pedal sank uselessly to the floor. The car began to pick up speed, careening down the winding road. "Hold on!" Mark shouted, gripping the wheel tightly. The children screamed, and Amanda's voice rose above the chaos, a desperate cry to the heavens. "Lord, save us!" The car skidded wildly, narrowly missing a massive oak tree before crashing into a ditch. The world went silent. When Amanda opened her eyes, she saw Mark slumped over the wheel, blood trickling down his forehead. The children were crying, but appeared unhurt. She checked them frantically, relief flooding her when she found no injuries. "Mark!" she shouted, shaking him. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. They had survived. As Amanda helped her family out of the wrecked car, headlights appeared in the distance. A pickup truck pulled up, and a burly man stepped out. "You folks okay?" he asked. Amanda explained what had happened, her voice shaking. The man offered to take them to a nearby mechanic. "This road's dangerous," he said. "You're lucky you made it out alive." Amanda's knees buckled as she realized how close they had come to disaster. "It wasn't luck," she whispered. "It was prayer." At the mechanic's shop, the truth came to light. The brake lines had been cut. Amanda's stomach churned as she thought about the shadowy figure Sarah had seen, the eerie warning from the old woman, and the inexplicable series of events. Back home, Mark's demeanor changed. He began to see Amanda's faith in a new light, not as superstition, but as a source of strength and protection. "I owe you my life," he told her one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe God my life." From that day forward, the Johnsons never began a trip without prayer. Mark became the one to lead, his voice steady as he thanked God for another day. Their harrowing journey became a story they told often, a testament to the power of faith and the unseen hand that guides and protects. For Amanda, it was proof that even in the darkest moments, prayer could light the way.